Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Teena Jha, you're watching Perspective. On the show today, we are going to be talking about heightened tensions between the US and China over the suspected spy balloon. As you may be aware, the US military downed the suspected Chinese spy balloon over the Atlantic Ocean and launched a mission to recover all the equipment from its debris. It drew a strong reaction from China, of course, which insisted that the object was a civilian balloon intended for meteorological research. Accusing the United States of indiscriminate use of force, China said it had seriously impacted and also damaged efforts and progress in stabilizing Sino-US relations. So with an eminent panel of experts, we will analyze the suspected spy balloon saga and how it has dealt a blow to the already strained US-China relations. Joining me in the studio is Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, Center for East Asian Studies, School for International Studies, JNU. Thank you, Professor, and welcome to the program. And joining us virtually is Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the USA. Ambassador, welcome to the program as well. And Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, retired. He's a defense and strategy expert. General Kulkarni, delighted to have you on the program as well. Professor, the first word to you. A civilian warship used for research, as China claims, or a spy in the American skies. Which is the theory which is more believable?
Well, actually, since the Second World War, the Japanese used these balloons for missions, combat missions on the US, closer to the Pearl Harbor incident. And later on, the Americans used the balloons on the Soviet Union. And Chinese have used it extensively because of the low cost factor. Compared to the low Earth observation satellites, these have several advantages like hovering for 2 or 3 days on a particular area, and that gives them advantage in terms of surveillance of anything. And so there have been a lot of reports about during the Trump administration and the Biden administration, there are at least 3 times the balloon has gone up on the US territory. So it is not new, and so this suggests, and let me also say it flew on Japan. It flew on Andaman and Nicobar Joint Command. It flew on Taiwan and other areas. So it is, we get information now that it has been all around.
So it's not something new, but perhaps because, you know, in this age of satellite technology, where countries use this particular technology to gather intelligence data, the fact that Chinese are actually using a spy balloon, is that coming more of a shock to everyone? And also the American intelligence agencies, perhaps it comes as a shock.
Surveillance balloons have some advantages. For example, they have synthetic aperture radars, which means that they can penetrate the clouds and see what they want to see. Number 2, they also have a lot of artificial intelligence related materials through which they gather information and process these and convey it back home. The most important advantage is that they are looking at an object for a long time, so which means it can also be used for laser weapons in the future, testing laser weapons, because they need temperatures, air movements, and a lot of other parameters. So they do it at a very professional level, sustainable level, and hence these are quite advantageous for anybody using the balloons.
General Kulkarni, how do you look at the entire spy balloon saga? It has, of course, escalated to a whole new level. Diplomatic tensions for the moment, a high-profile visit had to be cancelled. But do you agree that the spy balloons, the fact that A, they're cheaper and there are certain special attributes that they bring to this whole surveillance attack business, and because of which Chinese perhaps could have gone ahead with this idea? Or do you think that they were just testing the United States' ability to respond?
All things. You know, they are definitely testing the response of the United States. They are positively wanting to check how far would the United States go should they be doing what they're doing. It's also one of the means of gathering intelligence. If satellites are there, so are the balloons. They have various other means. We have, you know, even through space, cyber, so many things, your normal human spies all around. So you gather intelligence. There's one means of gathering intelligence, like the professor said. not just Second World War, even from French Revolution days, 1860, 1794, balloons have been used. And balloons are used, normally, you see a hot air ballooning, you go up in the air, you see much better than what you would be seeing while you're on the ground. So obviously these balloons have an advantage because they can stand over a particular area for a longer time. And that advantage it has. And that is why over almost a week you found that the dispute was going on. They were conveying it. And now whatever way the Chinese might say, whether whatever it is, definitely not. The fact, if you see the flight path of the balloon, the way it has gone right from China over Canada, Alaska Islands, Aleutian Islands, then coming on to deep into the United States, I can now look back and, when we were deployed along the eastern Ladakh, numerous times these kind of things, objects would be reported by the sentries that this is happening. We would be reporting it back as to what is it that is, flying that the sentries are reporting. Now I can definitely, put 2 to 2 4 that the Chinese were always at it. The Chinese, they always find everything and anything. You see all the visits that take place in India, whether you find Xi Jinping coming, you'll find some kind of an incident that occurred in India. Similarly, find after years, Blinken, some visit which was to happen of some official visit that might bring in some better relationship between the United States and China. Well, you see what's going on. Chinese are known to be feeling very insecure. And that feeling of insecurity, the Chinese use all means and definitely place where it was. It was only primarily to see whether the missile site, the silo, the underground installations, what is it that there is. The Chinese will never be feeling secure till they get the information, and by all means, human intelligence, they will definitely use it. Now balloons, they've been using it for many years and they will continue to use them. Satellites, and of course, then cyber is one complete, what you can be saying, that entire communication network that the Chinese are monitoring, they will be onto it. So Chinese will do, it is definitely a surveillance device, as you rightly said, it's cheap and therefore it is much more reusable, it is retrievable, and again it can be used, the low-cost option that is available. But now that it has been shot down and understand it is a surveillance device, well, we have got to be careful of the Chinese intention.
Okay, General, so the fact that, an insecure China doing all it can to gather intelligence data of its rivals, of a country like China, but from the point of view of the national security challenge that this has posed to America, is it something new, or have the Americans witnessed this kind of a national security challenge ever before?
Definitely. Yes. This has been there earlier also. They've done this in Texas earlier. And yet another 2-3 places the Chinese have done it. So it is nothing that the Americans are not aware of. Americans are fully aware of what the Chinese are up to. And even this particular balloon, they were sighted and they knew what it was all about. But the Chinese are wanting to convey it in a very polite manner. No, it's all weather, ballooning. It has nothing to do with sensitive this thing. But now that it has been brought down, I'm sure all of it is already revealed, and the Pentagon has already released that this is a surveillance device. There is no denying the fact. And it is indicative, it is a security challenge. It is a challenge. Definitely it is a challenge. Because, there are various kinds of balloons. How much, even normally, even when we have night sentries, we see a certain amount. You see a scan a particular area. You can tell a man to be looking now he is going to look up in the sky also every now and then. Is he able to spot something that is moving? Well, the satellites are moving at night. When it's a pitch dark night, you can see satellites moving from place A to place B in a particular motion. Now you can see the balloons also. You could also see the lights of on the balloons sometimes. So there are so many challenges. How difficult it is for people at night, day. Even we now need surveillance devices, not just basically dependent on human sentries standing there. Our own artificial intelligence to be used to ensure that what is going on in the sky, what's going on the ground, what's in front of us, what's behind. Oh, it is definitely very, very difficult. But then that's what the Chinese would want, that the life for the enemy should be made very, very difficult. It's challenging, but we are up to it. We can face challenge. As India, we can face challenge. Americans will also face challenge. It's the Chinese who are going to, because they feel insecure, they are going to likely to be more isolated in the world, and the wolf warrior diplomacy is what makes China afloat. Otherwise, by now, people know, especially after the pandemic, where China stands, after what it has done, the zero COVID policy, you saw how Xi Jinping was on the back foot. Knowing all these kind of things, and definitely after the Ukraine-Russian confrontation, you see what's going on. So the Chinese are definitely on the back foot, and you have to be careful of it.
Ambassador, in the wake of the challenges that General Kulkarni spoke about, does it indicate towards a dangerous moment in this new superpower rivalry that we are witnessing?
Well, you've been seeing a very sharp deterioration in US-China relations in recent years, particularly in the wake of Nancy Pelosi, who was then the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, visiting Taiwan. The Chinese had resorted to live fire drills all around the island, violated their air defense identification zone, their maritime zones, and even fired missiles which had landed in Japanese waters. So that, I think, was really the low point. Since then, both countries made an effort to try to stabilize the relationship, even though the fundamental strategic competition between the two would continue. At their meeting in Bali, President Joe Biden and Xi Jinping actually agreed to re-engage on selected issues which may be of benefit to resolving critical global issues, including climate change and the stabilization of the global economy. I think these two were some of the more important issues they had agreed to re-engage on. And President Biden had informed Xi Jinping that while they would compete, the US would compete vigorously with China, they were not seeking conflict. And both sides should try to engage to, see that there's no inadvertent conflict. So I think this incident will be a setback to the process, to the process of trying to bring in an element of stability in the relationship, which had become extremely volatile in the wake of the visit of Nancy Pelosi. It's going to be more difficult now to pick up the pieces. You have a Republican-controlled House of Representatives. Even in this incident, you saw that the Republicans were putting pressure on President Biden to shoot the balloon. And finally, they did in a responsible manner, not over civilian territory, but in the waters, so that no injuries took place on the ground. Now, we've had a lot of discussion on the why balloons when there are so many other means of communication. Now, the thing is that not only are the balloons more much cheaper than putting a satellite in orbit, they hover for a longer time over a particular spot, whereas satellites go into orbit and there's just a small window when they are covering an area. And the third is that they're actually more difficult to detect because they can fly at levels above the levels at which normal civil aviation takes place. So for all these reasons, it's one of the elements for information and intelligence gathering, along with satellite intelligence, cyber intelligence, human intelligence, and so on. So, because everybody likes to have multiple ways to verify the information that they have. And the only question is why at this juncture, when the Blinken visit was going to be scheduled and the, discovery of such a balloon over the US.
Absolutely. Multiple questions on the timing, particularly of how it was uncovered. But Professor, the manner in which the entire crisis has unfolded, a political storm has erupted, where does it leave Joe Biden? I mean, do you think that he's now in a typically more vulnerable position domestically?
Well, there is that debate between the Democrats and the Republicans on how to address the China question, and they have formed a congressional committee to address the China-related matters, and a senator has been appointed as the director for the China-related issues. It is a big issue since the Trump administration has implemented the tariff wars on over nearly $235 billion, and Chinese retaliated. On October 9th last year, there was the $130 billion ban on the semiconductors to be supplied to the Huawei and ZTE, and so this has escalated the tariff wars and technology wars between the two sides. So it has a domestic element, and there is also a consensus that emerged since late Trump on what do they do on China-related matters. So it is related to the economy, it is related to the military. For example, the Taiwan Straits, South China Sea, where the Americans keep sending the ships in order to reach the 12 nautical miles closer to these Chinese occupied islands in the South China Sea, or reassuring the Japanese on the Senkaku Islands protection and the Taiwan Straits. We have also had the Quad and the Indo-Pacific moving ahead, and India has been a member, and so it has also some implications for the India-China border related, that is Galwan, Yangtze on Tawang, other areas. So it has been, the envelope has been expanding in terms of the China-US related, and it has a domestic kind of blowback in the US politics. Especially in elections, there is a trend since Clinton administration to flag the China-related challenge, and this has been a consistent one in the domestic politics. On the crisis situations that you raised in the beginning, there are a number of incidents actually, but equilibrium has been shifting towards China. For example, in 1993, there was an Inha incident where the CIA suspected the Chinese vessel was carrying chemical weapons, but when they opened up the ship, they couldn't find anything. The second major incident was the 2009 USS Impeccable incident, where the American ship was pushed away in the South China Sea, and nearly 12 destroyers of the Americans have been pushed away in the South China Sea. So that was a crisis situation. But the most spectacular one was on the April 1st, 2001, where we witnessed the EP-3 surveillance plane incident. So it was going 12 nautical miles above the airspace. So the Chinese pilots, Wang Wei, they have brought down the surveillance plane, and they chopped off the surveillance plane and put them in craters, sent them back to the Americans. They did not provide any American embassy assistance to the crew members who were all arrested at that time. Such crises have been happening, and what is important now is there is a political change within China from what Deng Xiaoping used to say, Tao Guang Yang Hui, that is keeping a low profile. Now Xi Jinping is insisting on accomplishing something, Yoso So Wei. Right. So that is the significant thing, that they want to challenge the American leadership, and so that is the key factor.
And towards accomplishing this, General Kulkarni, the fact that this, whatever has happened related to the spy balloon, this is another example of how China is flexing its muscle beyond the region, trampling all established rules, something which goes against what India has been advocating for, that how important is a rules-based order. Coming back to the question of now on the implications, because of course India-China relations are also not, after what happened at Galwan, our relations have also been at an all-time low. What implications do you see the current scenario having on the India-China relations, and how concerning is this incident for our security as well?
See, firstly, we must be careful, very cautious, because with China, China can't be trusted. That's the first thing. Secondly, China believes in to be dealing with from a position of strength. You can only deal with China from a position of strength. There's no other way that you can tackle China, because China will continue to do what it is, and India has experienced it. And right from 1950, we know till date what China has been doing to us. So we have to be careful, we have to be cautious. We have to put all our means at our disposal to deter China from doing it what wants to do. What is the aim of China? As I see, Chinese don't want India to progress economically. And it is using Pakistan against India, a low-cost option for China. We have to ensure that we grow economically. If only when we grow economically can we be strength, we can gain militarily. Otherwise, diplomatically, then we are always on the back foot and trying to do a very difficult balancing act. Economic growth, very essential, leading to a strong military, but not with the purpose of attacking anybody. We are not like expansionist China, but to deter anybody from attacking India or from wanting to look with an evil eye on India. And then we have a strength that shall grow. In that context, we like all along 3,488 kilometer long LAC that we have with China, which we have to be very, very careful, whether it is in eastern Ladakh, whether it is opposite Sikkim, or it's in Arunachal Pradesh, all along, because Chinese will continue to do what they're doing. They will use all these low-cost options. Balloons is absolutely a low-cost option, because if I can see the balloon, so can the balloon see me and much more. And not just that, it is in their area. Right now, of course, this particular balloon has been spotted in the American territory, and therefore it has been brought down. But look at it in eastern Ladakh, where I faced myself. I know how it looks like. You can see it there, but there's nothing you can do about it. So with kind of drones that you have, the satellites you have, now the balloons that are there, which were always in use, all these kinds of means of surveillance that the Chinese will use to gather all intelligence about us, we have to be very careful. The only way to deter is to prevent, and for prevent, we have to gain strength. And to have strength, we have to ensure that at no point of time, Chinese are looking at that vulnerability. Chinese have to us, what do they have? Pakistan, the low-cost option to keep India subdued. What do they have? North Korea has, again, against America. So these two countries, they can conveniently plan against the two democracies of the world. We have to be very careful. We have to grow economically. We have no option other than to grow economically. We have to grow militarily also, but we just can't grow militarily without growing economically. So we are in a catch-22 situation, and therefore we have to balance. We have to ensure that we grow economically, at the same time modernize our military to ensure we use all means. We have missiles, we are using artificial intelligence, we are using space technology, we have to be very careful of the cyber security, all of it, because it's a hybrid war. Conventional war may or may not happen. But what is the concept of Chinese? To subdue the enemy without a fight. Because the Chinese won't indulge in all these kind of fights because they know what it means to them. But they will use all means to subdue India.
Clearly, and when we know their tactics, we have to prepare accordingly. Ambassador, the fact that the US downed the suspected spy balloon, and China, of course, has reacted very, very strongly. It has threatened of consequences. An indication of this mistrust between US and China is going to just linger on forever. How do you look at the tensions building up further between both these countries and the implications on the larger world peace? Of course, peace is too much to expect given that we are still in the wake of the Russia-Ukraine war. But the fact that geopolitics is being disturbed by anything that happens in any part of the country, in any part of the globe, I beg your pardon.
Look, I see the US-China strategic competition becoming much sharper, and it has an economic dimension, it has a technological dimension, which is very important, because both know that control over the modern or future economy is going to be dependent on who gets dominance over the new technologies, which are now making a mark, from artificial intelligence to robotics to 5G communication, and so on. And militarily, of course, the competition is becoming stronger because China is spending much more on its military budget. But I would say, if you look at the US national security policy paper, which they put out, they have actually advocated a differential approach to Russia, which they see as a kind of immediate threat. Where they say they will, contain Russia. And then on the other hand, with China, which they identify as the country with both the intention and capability to pose an actual challenge to the US. But they say that they will compete with China, they will invest more in their domestic economy and outcompete China. They don't talk of containing China. And at the same time, they will also collaborate with China or seek dialogue with China on global issues where they can, including climate change, stabilizing the global economy, the global health and pandemic issues. So it's a kind of a more nuanced policy, but we have to wait and see because events have a way of taking over. And even though the Biden administration may be seeking to bring an element of stability in the US-China relations while stepping up the technological competition because they banned all the supply of any chip-related technology, not only from the US, but also from third countries which may be using US parts or technology in making of their chips. So you can see that on the technological side, Biden has stepped up the pressure on China. But on the other hand, he's seeking to avoid untoward incidents because the US is already engaged in the Ukraine front, on the Ukraine front. So I would imagine that after some time, there may be an effort to try to get back to some degree of engagement, but this is definitely a setback to those efforts.
And clearly, when those engagement efforts will happen is something that we'll all have to wait for. But for now, Biden faces really tough questions domestically, and he is in a typically very, very vulnerable position also. So let's see how he answers all of those accusations about being a weak president and about how this breach actually happened. So let's see what pans out in the days to come. But clearly, this rivalry and the trading of barbs between both countries is going to intensify for at least another couple of days. That having been said, we'll have to wind up the program. Thank you once again to all the guests for joining me on this edition of Perspective, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.